Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is another in my Fiction in Real Life series. In this series, I pair a fiction book, a historical fiction book about a specific event in history, with a non-fiction book that addresses that same event. And in today's video, we are going to be looking at the Blitz in London during World War II. So the fiction book that I want to talk about is Secrets of a Charmed Life by Susan Meissner. This book was written in 2015, and it has dual timelines, although the majority of the book is set during World War II. So let me just read you the back. She stood at a crossroads, half aware that her choice would send her down a path from which there could be no turning back. But instead of two choices, she saw only one, because it was all she really wanted to see. Present day, Oxford, England. Young American scholar Kendra Van Zandt, eager to pursue her vision of a perfect life, interviews Isabel McFarland just when the elderly woman is ready to give up secrets about the war she has kept for decades. Beginning with who she really is. What Kendra receives from Isabel is both a gift and a burden, one that will test her convictions and her heart. 1940s England. As Hitler wages an unprecedented war against London's civilian population, hundreds of thousands of children are evacuated to foster homes in the rural countryside. But even as 15-year-old Emmy Downtree and her much younger sister Julia find refuge in a charming Cotswold cottage, Emmy's burning ambition to return to the city and apprentice with a fashion designer pits her against Julia's profound need for her sister's presence. Acting at cross purposes just as the Luftwaffe rains down its terrible destruction, the sisters are cruelly separated and their lives are transformed. So, when I started reading this, Emmy is 15. Her sister Julia is 7 or 8. And so, Emmy doesn't really realize what's happening. It's the very beginning of the war. She lives in London with her mother and her sister. Her and her sister both have different fathers. And she dreams of becoming a designer, specifically a wedding dress designer. And she, kind of ignoring the war and what's going on, goes to a wedding dress shop that she has been looking through the window and at the window display of for a while to ask for a job. And she takes along her designs with her in order to get the opinion of the owner of this dress shop. And so even though she's only 15, she convinces this woman to give her a job. Now, I completely understand that she's 15 and she does really act like a 15-year-old. But I'll confess, I find a lot of 15-year-olds really annoying. I mean, they're super selfish at that age, right? And pretty focused on what they want. And so she completely ignores the fact that there's war going on around her and assumes that she can just have this job and things will be fine. She has a conflicted relationship with her mom. Again, not a huge surprise. She's 15. Then, of course, the Blitz is expected, or they expect invasion, or who knows what they really expected to come. But the children are evacuated, and Emmy is sent out of the city with her sister, and she really resents this. She does not want to go. She just would prefer her sister be sent on her own. But of course her mother's like, I need you to take care of your sister. And so they get sent to the Cotswolds. But the entire time Emmy is scheming how she can get back to London, because this person that she did end up working for knows a designer who is coming to the city and he is willing to give her an interview. She wants to be his apprentice. But again, like, she's completely ignoring the fact that there is a war going on, that there is danger, and that maybe she needs to put her own dreams and plans on hold for a while. So she ends up sneaking back to the city. Her sister discovers her as she's preparing to go, and she cannot figure out any other way to stop her from coming, and so she takes her sister along with her. And the day they get back to London is the day the Blitz starts. And so then, of course, as it says on the back, the sisters are separated and the story goes from there. So I won't reveal any more. I don't want to give any big spoilers or anything. But at first I was thinking, if this entire story is about Emmy when she's 15, I'm going to lose interest very fast, because I really did not like Emmy at 15. But she does grow up, and the story goes on from there. And it was actually a really engaging story. The descriptions of the Blitz were just horrific, and Emmy's desperate attempts to find her sister in that situation were some of the most compelling parts of this story. So this is a historical fiction set during the Blitz, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. My non-fiction choice to accompany that for fiction in real life is The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson. Now, this is described as being a saga of Churchill, family, and defiance during the Blitz. And that is accurate, but like, I think, you know, like most publishers or the marketing people in a publishing company, they don't get it exactly right, because this book is about the Blitz, but more than that, it is a book about the first year in office for Winston Churchill. But regardless, the Blitz plays a huge part in this book, and so I felt like it could definitely count. I really like Erik Larson, and he writes in a way that is very readable and very approachable. It reads basically like narrative nonfiction. So it is a fairly big book. It was about 500 pages. But really gripping and really very compelling. There's a picture at the very beginning that is the perfect choice it's the only picture in this book, but it honestly says it all. There are 3 gentlemen looking at the books in a completely bombed out library. But that picture says it all, because in this book, the argument that Erik Larson is making is that Winston Churchill was the right leader for during the war, because he taught the people of England, the people of Britain, the art of being fearless. And this picture, to me, right here, just shows that 100%. The Blitz, we don't get to the Blitz, which started in September of 1940, until over 200 pages into this book, part 4 of the book. And the reason for that, and the reason why that's 100% acceptable, is because this isn't 100% a story just about the Blitz. It's about Churchill's first year in office, and he became prime minister on, I believe, the 10th of May. So we also had to find out what happened between the 10th of May and September, when the Blitz started. This book feels very personal because he includes intimate details about the Churchills, about Churchill himself and those closest to him, his family members, but also his personal secretaries and cabinet ministers, etc. The author also uses civilian diaries, which was so brilliant because it really showed the personal effect of the Blitz on the population of London, but also other cities in the country that were bombed heavily as well. I often thought of Foyle's War as I was reading this. I love Foyle's War, the TV series Foyle's War. It was written by Anthony Horowitz, and there would be something that was addressed in this book, and I would think, oh, I saw that on an episode of Foyle's War. Oh, they addressed that in Foyle's War. So it was good. It was a good reminder that Anthony Horowitz really did his research for that show. It is a superb show. If you've never seen Foyle's War, I highly recommend it. So this book was very compelling, very real. I loved the diaries, letters, reports, and memos. The author used a lot of primary source material, which was really great. That is what really made this book so compelling and feel so real. And so I've got a few tabs in here of little bits that I wanted to read to you. So let's get into that. I don't know if I've said it yet, but I gave this book 5 stars. It was phenomenal, and I can highly recommend it. So, Violet Bonham Carter, daughter of H.H. Asquith, the former Prime Minister who died in 1928, wrote a letter to Churchill. She knew him well and had no doubt that his energy and pugnacity would transfigure the office. She writes, "I know, as you do, that the wind has been sown and that we must all reap the whirlwind, but you will ride it instead of being driven before it. Thank heaven that you are there and at the helm of our destiny, and may the nation's spirit be kindled by your own." Why don't people write like that anymore, right? I don't think I've ever gotten an email that's that eloquent. But I loved that phrase that she said, the whirlwind, but you will ride it instead of being driven before it. And then he would quite often intersperse with chapters about Göring over in Germany, because Göring was the one who was in charge of the Luftwaffe. And so that was very interesting, but he does a description here of Göring that I found just so interesting. Göring, large, buoyant, ruthless, cruel, had used his close connection to Hitler to win this commission, deploying the sheer strength of his ebullient and joyously corrupt personality to overcome Hitler's misgivings, at least for the time being. I thought, what a way to thoroughly describe a person in just a few short words. And I loved this phrase, joyously corrupt personality. Very telling. And then, in the chapter called, Chapter 8, The First Bombs. Here, as in other speeches, Churchill demonstrated a striking trait, his knack for making people feel loftier, stronger, and above all, more courageous. John Martin, one of his private secretaries, believed that he, quote, gave forth a confidence and invincible will that called out everything that was brave and strong. Under his leadership, Martin wrote, Britons began to see themselves as, quote, protagonists on a vaster scene and as champions of a high and invincible cause for which the stars in their courses were fighting. And then in chapter 28, it's the inclusion of little stories like this that I loved so much, because this is difficult material to read, and yet it was the story of real people, and it's the inclusion of stories like this that really highlight that and remind you over and over again that these were real people. So there's a group of people out at the country home Chequers. One of them was Admiral Admiral Pound. He's the first Sea Lord. To the amusement of all, Admiral Pound tripped while descending the steps. Wrote Colville, quote, "The first Sea Lord fell down first one flight of steps, and then, having picked himself up disconsolately, he tumbled down another, ending in a heap on the ground where a sentry threatened him with a bayonet." End quote. Pound righted himself, muttering, "This is not the place for a first Sea Lord." Churchill, amused, said, "Try and remember you are an admiral of the fleet, and not a midshipman." I love it. In chapter 36, he talks about tea, and I love tea, so I found this very interesting. The one universal balm for the trauma of war was tea. It was the thing that helped people cope. People made tea during air raids and after air raids, and on breaks between retrieving bodies from shattered buildings. Tea bolstered the network of 30,000 observers who watched for German aircraft over England, operating from 1,000 observation posts, all stocked with tea and kettles. Mobile canteens dispensed gallons of it, steaming from spigots. In propaganda films, the making of tea became a visual metaphor for carrying on. Quote, "Tea acquired almost a magical importance in London life, according to one study of London during the war." Continuing the quote, "And the reassuring cup of tea actually did seem to help cheer people up in a crisis." End quote. Tea ran through mass observation diaries like a river. "That's one trouble about the raids," a female diarist complained. "People do nothing but make tea and expect you to drink it." Tea anchored the day, though at tea time Churchill himself did not actually drink it, despite reputedly having said that tea was more important than ammunition. He preferred whiskey and water. Tea was comfort and history. Above all, it was English. As long as there was tea, there was England. But now the war and the strict rationing that came with it threatened to shake even this most prosaic of pillars. The chapter on Coventry and when Coventry was bombed was horrifying. It was quite the chapter. I liked reading it though because there's been a lot of talk and conspiracy theories and all kinds of stuff around the bombing of Coventry, and so to get some primary source information about what happened there was very interesting. But the descriptions of the bombs falling and how people responded, it was just a really moving chapter. And then much later in the book, Churchill and his family visited Bristol after it had been heavily bombed. As the cars headed back to the train station, the crowd followed. For all the laughing and cheering, it could have been a city festival from more peaceful times. Men, women, and children walked behind Churchill's car, their faces gleaming with delight. Quote, "These are not mere fair weather friends," Mary wrote in her diary. "Papa has served them with his heart and his mind always through peace and wars, and they have given him in his finest and darkest hour their love and confidence." End quote. Mary is Winston Churchill's daughter. She was struck by the strange power of her father to bring forth courage and strength in the most trying of circumstances. Quote, "Oh, please, dear God," she wrote, "preserve him unto us and lead us to victory and peace." As the train departed, Churchill waved at the crowd from the windows and kept waving until the train was out of sight. Then, reaching for a newspaper, he sat back and raised the paper to mask his tears. "They have such confidence," he said. "It is a grave responsibility." And just a couple more here. "And so, with family turmoil, civic trauma, and Hitler's deputy falling from the sky, the first year of Churchill's leadership came to an end. Against all odds, Britain stood firm, its citizens more emboldened than cowed. Somehow, through it all, Churchill had managed to teach them the art of being fearless. On one of Churchill's full moon weekends at Ditchley, Diana Cooper, wife of Information Minister Duff Cooper, told Churchill that the best thing he had done was to give people courage. He did not agree. I never gave them courage, he said. I was able to focus theirs. I can highly recommend this book. It was a really good read, and I learned a lot. So a number of years ago, my husband Aaron and I were in London for a trip, and we visited the cabinet war rooms, which were an underground bunker where Churchill did a lot of work during the Blitz. And we also visited the Imperial War Museum that had a Blitz exhibit, and you could actually go into an air raid shelter, and you sat down, and then like you heard like the bombs falling, the air raid shelter was shaking and moving, and you could hear like people upset and crying, and the sound of the bombs and the fires. It was quite the experience. I believe it was called the Blitz experience. And so I'm going to include a few of those pictures from that trip here, just so that you can see. And I also have this book, and this is very heavy, Lost London, 1870 to 1945. And there was just a picture or two in here that I wanted to show you of the Blitz. And so this one here, the big picture is St. Paul's Cathedral. And the description is 15th of April 1942, view of St. Paul's Cathedral from Friday Street, with the ruins of St. Augustine's Watling Street in the foreground. The narrow lanes around Old Change, seen on page 94, were flattened with the bombing. So yeah, it was so destructive. All right, so those are the two books that I wanted to highlight for this fiction in real life. Fiction, Secrets of a Charmed Life by Susan Meissner, paired with nonfiction, The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson. And I have a few recommendations for more reading if you're interested. The London Blitz Murders by Max Allan Collins. Although it's called the London Blitz Murders, this is actually set in London in 1942. It is after the Blitz, although there were still some bombs that fell. This historical mystery, Agatha Christie is a main character. She is in London working again at a dispensary where she meets Bernard Spilsbury, who is famously the Home Office pathologist, and they get involved because there is a killer, and they're calling him the Blackout Ripper, and her and Spilsbury get involved investigating. So if you like historical mystery, this could be a good option for you. And another good option, one I just read, and it's just out now, is called The Blitz Detective by, oh, I should have checked beforehand. I'll put the picture up here though, because I don't have the book. It's historical fiction. This was a really good story. Again, this was a historical mystery set in London during the Blitz, and in this case it really is during the Blitz. the main detective and his sergeant get called to the scene of a murder. There is a dead body in a van, and they are able to get some identity, identify who this man is and how he was killed. But then the van gets completely destroyed when a bomb falls. So before any other of the team can arrive to collect evidence, the body and the van are like just demolished in a bomb. So it makes investigating the mystery much more difficult. And so that's another historical mystery fiction that I can recommend. And then a few non-fiction: Murder on the Home Front by Molly Lefebure, a true story of morgues, murderers, and mysteries during the London Blitz. The year was 1941. While World War II raged in the skies above London, on an unending battle against violence, murder, and the criminal underground was being fought on the streets below. When forensic pathologist Dr. Keith Simpson asked Molly Lefebure, a keen young journalist, to be his secretary, her family and friends were aghast. You've a nasty, morbid, unfeminine streak in you, I'm afraid, a boyfriend wrote to her. But Molly was intrigued to know exactly what goes on inside a mortuary, and in doing so, she became the first secretary ever to set foot in one. Capable and curious, Miss Molly quickly became indispensable to Dr. Simpson as he meticulously pursued the truth, accompanying him from somber morgues to London's most gruesome murder scenes. She observed and assisted as he uncovered the secrets that murder victims keep and tales that all corpses tell. With a sharp sense of humor and a rebellious spirit, Lefebure paints a vivid portrait of wartime London as she relates a fast-paced story of crime and punishment. This one was really interesting, and it was first published in 1954. So yeah, if you're interested in true crime and kind of what it's like to still investigate those things in the middle of the Blitz, this could be the book for you. 5 Days in London, May 1940 by John Lukacs. I have not read this one yet, but considering that The Splendid and the Vile takes in the whole of Churchill's first year, I thought I would include this one as well, because this is before the Blitz, but the first few weeks of Churchill being the prime minister. The days from May 24th to May 28th, 1940 altered the course of the history of the 20th century as the members of the British War Cabinet debated whether to negotiate with Hitler or to continue the war. The decisive importance of those 5 days is the focus of John Lukacs's magisterial work. And then finally, Blitz Hospital by Penny Starns. I haven't read this one yet either. True stories of nursing in wartime London. And the reason why this one caught my eye so much is, of course, it takes place during the Blitz. When the Blitz hit London, everything changed. Once the home front was relatively safe. Now it wasn't. Suddenly London was its own front line. Blitz Hospital follows the fortunes of two major London hospitals as they struggled to cope with the mounting wartime casualties, St. Thomas's and the London. The diaries, letters, and reports of medical and nursing staff highlight the many human stories of tremendous courage and hope that lived and breathed within the corridors of London's hospitals during the Blitz. So one thing that I really like, and you can maybe tell this from the type of books that I recommend, but I really like history that zones in on something specific. So in this case, it's 5 days in May. In this case, it's 2 hospitals during the Blitz. And in this case, it's 1 forensic pathologist and his secretary during the Blitz. So I really like history that hones in on a specific topic rather than kind of, you know, trying to cover like vast amounts of information and years of history. So this is my fiction in real life, The Blitz. Have you read either of these books? I'd love to chat about them in the comment section down below. Is the Blitz a piece of history that's interesting to you? Do any of these recommendations sound interesting to you? Do you have a recommendation for me, fiction or non-fiction, about the Blitz specifically during World War II? I would love to hear about that in the comment section down below as well. And I'll see you for another video soon. Bye.